This is Julie Croston from Cambridge School Volunteers Art and Science in One program, and I have a guest today I'm talking with and hoping she'll share some ideas with you about nature journaling. She is Erica Beade, who is the drawing instructor for the Art and Science in One program, and she does some other teaching as well. Erica, can you tell us something about yourself to start?
So let's see. I've been with the program since the beginning. I was very lucky to have Julie tap me on the shoulder about, I don't know, 9 years ago to ask me if I'd be interested in doing this, and I sort of jumped on that. I thought it was a great idea. So I'm an illustrator specializing in science, health, and nature subjects, and I've also been just teaching drawing for about almost 20 years for adults and kids, and I love drawing as it relates to nature. I think that there's just a great combination.
Did you start drawing as a child outdoors, or was that something that developed later?
I pretty much drew everywhere, probably from the age of 5 or 6. I was lucky in that I had parents who were interested in nature, and one of the things that they did with me, we lived in an apartment building in Toronto, and they put me out on the balcony with binoculars and a notebook and a Peterson field guide, and we were on a flyway, so I got to watch birds through the binoculars and draw them, and so yeah, started early with balcony drawing.
That might be something that comes in handy these days when people are stuck inside.
That's true, very true.
So tell us something about the teaching you do outside of the program, if you would.
Sure. So I teach a lot at the Harvard Museum of Natural History. So that is definitely drawing as it relates to natural history. So botanical drawing, animal drawing, do some imaginative drawing too, but sort of inspired by nature. And so I teach at other venues as well. One of the things that I would be doing this year, if things were different, were I usually teach outdoor sketching at Mount Auburn Cemetery, just independent sketching workshops, and we draw all sorts of things, botanicals and landscape, and capturing textures, all sorts of things, and it's just a beautiful place to draw. So this is my favorite time of year for being outside and drawing, and with a group, it's a lot of fun.
So if you were advising people who might be watching this about how to start nature journaling, particularly if you are a parent who hasn't done drawing outdoors in nature before and you want to take a kid out, whether they're a first grader or a fourth grader, what are some of the guidelines that you would suggest, or ways to make them comfortable doing something totally new like that?
There's a lot of good tricks for that. I think one is not to make it too formal, to sort of take a fairly casual attitude towards it, but also just to start with conversations. So first, get them noticing things. One thing that I really love to do is a framework called I Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of, and the idea is really just to look at something closely, have a conversation about it, where you point out each of you point out something that you notice, something that you wonder, and something that it reminds you of, and it's just a great way to get them looking more closely. I think emphasize the looking part of it, and then after that starts to get them thinking about how they might draw it. And when they're drawing it, try to emphasize the idea that it's not trying to make beautiful drawings. It's really about trying to just capture the thing so that you have it as a record of what you saw, and almost think about it like they're making a diagram rather than trying to make a beautiful drawing. Really look at shapes and angles and proportions. One thing I really like to do with kids, especially little kids, is to have them close one eye if they can, or just put a hand over, and just in the air trace the shape of something. There's something about feeling that the shape of that outside edge in the air with their pencil that makes it easier to translate it onto the page. There's something about that kinetic thing that really can help. I also find with kids, if they really are nervous about drawing at first, let them do a page of just scribbling. Tell them to make the worst possible drawing they could make, and they'll loosen up that way. It's a fun thing to do. And
What are some of the things that someone going out with a child could be looking for with them when they go to even if it's a local park or, you know, a small green space?
Sure. One thing I always like to have them do, you can, if they're really little, you can do it for them, is just to think about sort of where they are, what the date is, what the time is, just something to kind of make it a journal, to make it a little record of a particular moment in time. And that also helps them to start noticing things about the season. I think it's good to talk about the season and what they might expect to see, or what they might look for. So signs of change is one thing that is always fun to do. Is you know, spring is such a great time to be out there. So what kinds of things do they see? Maybe point out plants that are at different stages of growth. Point out maybe birds doing different activities, and those might change over time. Um, and also just with really little kids, you can do some very simple things, like just how many different shapes of leaf can you find, or just how many different colors of rock can you find, or you know, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate or fancy. It can be something really quite simple.
Hmm.
Also, another thing is patterns and patterns, textures, things like that. They can focus on and not even have to focus on trying to draw a whole thing.